Good afternoon, Governors. This part of our presentation today is focused upon how I'm leading a change programme in St Patrick's relating to outcomes for children with SEND. And it's at the heart of what we're trying to do this year and is one of our key school improvement priorities. What's life like for a typical SEND student at St Patrick's? Let me tell you. A typical SEND student at St Patrick's is more likely to be fixed term excluded, is more likely to spend time in our internal exclusion room, is more likely to receive more behaviour points, is less likely to receive achievement points, is more likely to have poorer attendance, is more likely to put in less effort in class and have an inferior attitude towards homework, and ultimately is likely to make less progress in their exams. So we need to change what we do here at St Patrick's in order to better support them so that they ultimately can thrive, be successful, and ultimately go out of St Patrick's making a valid and positive contribution to society. Let me talk to you about outcomes. Let me go into a bit more detail in relation to that. The average Progress 8 score of a child in 2019, whether you were SEND or non-SEND, is very different. A typical SEND child at St Patrick's in 2019 achieved a Progress 8 score of minus 0.06. A non-SEND student achieved a Progress 8 score of plus 0.66. That trend, that gap between outcomes of SEND and non-SEND students is typical. We see that. In fact, in the year just gone, the gap was bigger than the year before. But SEND students consistently make less progress from their starting point compared to a non-SEND student. But it's not just about Year 11. Year 11, those numbers that I just highlighted to you are merely a snapshot in a moment in time. That's what GCSE outcomes are. But they reflect the nature of our support over the 5 years these children have spent in our care. So we have more to do from day one in supporting children with more pronounced learning needs. And that gap in outcomes between SEND and non-SEND students is too wide, and it will stay that way. And I'll show you some data about current students, unless we do something about it. The quote in the blue box is something I thought I'd share with you. This was from one of our heads of department who gave us feedback on the back of our recent Twilight. All staff are aware of SEND students within classes. However, staff struggle to support pupils with the lack of information available to them on the system. E.g., we know a pupil receives 25% extra time, but we don't know specific strategies that help us to utilise this time in class. So SEND pupils get more, but we're not necessarily utilising those resources, whether it be time, whether it be adults, whether it be other input from other agencies in the best way possible. This is our current Year 11 cohort. The data on the screen reflects the predictions made by teachers at the end of Year 10. Notice the gap between a SEND student and a typical non-SEND student. The data that we've just seen from the 3 previous cohorts who've left St Patrick's is being replicated again. But it's not necessarily just in raw outcomes. The data on the screen now shows effort and engagement scores. Effort and engagement is a measure we use to understand what's actually happening in classrooms around our school. So we ask all our teachers to rate our students based on their attitude towards classwork and homework and engagement and how much they respond to feedback. This was what our teachers said about current students in Year 11 based upon their approach to learning. A typical SEND student, there were 26 of them in Year 11, they got an average score of 17.7. It's out of 28. Look at a non-SEND student. There's 154 kids in Year 11 who are non-SEND. Their average score is 23.49. What's that saying to you? It's saying to you that SEND students put in less effort are less engaged, have issues with their homework, with post-lesson learning. We see this in other year groups too. The data on the screen now shows current year 9 and current year 8, but this was taken at the end of their previous year. So what's this showing? Well, it's showing the scores in relation to effort and homework, and it shows SEND students judged by teachers to put in less effort and have an inferior attitude towards homework. So they're already displaying some of the signs of falling behind.
It's interesting because the target percentage on target grades hasn't yet, the gap's not opened up yet, has it?
Correct.
It really indicates.
Yep. So you actually spot the percentage of grades that are above target is broadly similar.
It happens as they get.
But actually we're seeing symptoms of their characteristics as learners beginning to differ. So the A for all students and the B for SEND students, it was ranked on A, B, C, D. A being the best and D being the most inferior. A behaviour log, this was interesting. The first column you can see here is all about achievement points. These are the points that are put on SIMS by our teachers in recognition of things they've done well. An average SEND student at the moment, up to yesterday, receives 194.9 achievement points. The average non-SEND student in the same time period since we started in September is receiving 208 points. Look at behaviour. So behaviour points are things added on SIMS that students have not done so well at, we need to record, and they're allocated some points. The average SEND student is on 23.5, the average non-SEND student's only on 7. So it's evident that SEND pupils are disproportionately overrepresented in terms of behaviour, yet underrepresented in terms of achievement.
And one caveat for governors would be that within the SEND categorisation, SEMH is going to be
Absolutely.
a key element of it.
Yep.
So you would expect to see.
So SEMH, the social, emotional, mental health, it's the largest proportion of SEND need we have in our school,
Yeah.
and it's those students in particular who are struggling.
Yeah, so there's a gap we'd expect to see, it's about narrowing the gap.
You saw in the previous presentation in the Pupil Welfare Committee, we talked to you about some numbers in relation to fixed term exclusions. 34% of the students who were fixed term excluded last year, 34% of them were on the SEN register. Again, they're more likely to receive one compared to a non-SEND one. If you look at attendance, students with SEND have more days off school. And so bearing in mind their attendance, their behaviour, fixed term exclusions, their attitude towards homework, their actual outcomes, we need to do something about it. So our strategic vision for this academic year and beyond is to improve support for all children with SEND, so they make academic progress that's now similar to those of non-SEND children. And ultimately, this is integral to our mission. I've come to that they have life and have it to the full, John 10:10. It's one of my favourite quotes, as Granny will say. But how can children go and truly live life to the full if they haven't had the full opportunity to get the best education here at St Patrick's? We do very well for SEND, and I'm going to talk to you about how our SEND pupils might compare with SEND pupils nationally, but we can and must do more. So what are we going to do? We've got 5 things. I've boiled this down to our 5-point plan. The first aspect of our strategy for this year is invest in the training of our TAs, and we're reforming performance management of our TAs. We'll also be and have introduced more bespoke interventions led by our teaching assistants to students that actually need it. But crucially, we're not just doing something because we have to. We're going to measure the impact of this. We're now attaching teaching assistants to departments, whereas previously they'd been pretty much velcroed to a child and followed them round the school, and I'll explain a little bit why we're doing that. We intend to provide more effective communication of strategies to support teaching and learning of SEND students, and we're creating a SEND department hub so that they have the resource and they have the identity in order to provide a better provision for our kids. At this point, I'm going to pause. Do any of the governors at this moment have any questions, or would they like me to elaborate on anything in relation to any of our strategic priorities? Patrick?
Leadership would be the thing that jumps out. I mean, in terms of framing how this is going to be led
Yep.
and supported for governors who might not be aware as we are.
Okay, so you're asking who?
Who, how, yeah. Where.
Okay, so governors are potentially aware at the moment. Our previous Senko, Mr Norton, resigned in January of this year, and we've had a gap, a temporary gap, which has been filled by Gareth Jones, who's been working across our partnership to support SEND provision internally. Now, there have been other people involved in supporting SEND provision, and Mrs Lane, one of our governors here today, has played a role in doing that too. Currently, I have strategic oversight for SEND provision in school, and I'll be working in the very short term with Mrs Bradford and her team in order to try and make some of these things happen, supported by Gareth Jones as our nominated Senko. From January onwards, we have appointed Luan Barry. Luan is starting on the 1st of Jan, and he's coming from the FE sector with a wealth of experience, a really great appointment, and he'll be continuing to drive this with me supporting him going forward. Any other questions?
Yeah, you might expand on this a bit,
Yep.
I don't know, but you're talking about sort of the bespoke interventions by the TAs and,
Yep.
and crucially in measuring the impact of this.
Yep.
Have you thought about how you're going to do that?
Yep, and actually it comes talking about, I've got some success criteria that's going to be able to articulate that, which I'll come back to in a second. Is that all right?
Will Mr Jones be overseeing all for 6 months after the income values?
So, are you asking about will Mr Jones still be involved beyond January
Yes.
onwards? Yeah, what I'll be doing is utilising his expertise in this area to ensure that our plan's being enacted as effectively as it could be. He still provides us support, and he will do beyond that, to the point where our Senko is up and running and knows what he's doing.
Yeah,
and
so currently he is our SENDCO,
Yeah.
and from January he'll be the SLE, the Specialist Leader of Education supporting the SENDCO, which will be the shift in dynamic.
So just to elaborate on some of our 5-point plan, in terms of our training, our EdPsych has provided some CBT-based programs that's focused on supporting children with SEMH. That's where our need is greatest. So we're now going to be training our TAs to be able to support our most vulnerable children. In terms of our bespoke interventions,